things that could test a hero who's a mouse.
Mousetrap.
A fairy.
Mean rat.
Large human.
Rowing with a matchstick.
Another mouse that's just the opposite personality.
Evil bird.
A ghost of its past family mouse.
Mouse hole too small.
A demon mouse devil.
Stinky cheese.
A really smart doctor mouse.
Clean freak human.
A secret riddle man.
A hole.
Die!
Oh.
Hole too small. That could test a mouse. But hole? That's the perfect thing for a mouse.
You're right. You're right.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muprov Musings. This is episode 8. I am your host, Hal Munger, and joining me now is your other host, Julian Bernardo.
Yes, I am your other host, as I have been. I hope that you've come to recognize me week by week, but we do have someone here this week who you will not recognize. As we continue our Hero's Journey series, we're pulling in the top experts around the world on various parts of the format, and we have secured one of those today. Joining us is Daania Tahir. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Daania. I'm a senior at Stanford, and I'm studying poli-sci and creative writing. I love improv. I started doing improv my sophomore fall. I took TAPS 1 of 3, and I was the class just kind of changed my trajectory because I was kind of not vibing at that time for personal reasons. And then I took that class, which was the only class I would go to sophomore fall. And it was at 9:30 a.m. and I would get up every day and I would go. And so I took that, and then I just loved the freedom that improv gave you. I loved the emphasis on failure and on just not trying to be good or funny or trying to be creative, and just doing the first thing that comes to your head, which I think is so key for improv and for just taking pressure off yourself. And I think in order to create something, the more that you want it to be good, the less that you will ever actually, I think, create something. And so, yeah, that's what I often think about when I do improv, is kind of just not thinking about what's funny or what's good or what's creative or what will, be the best thing to do, but it's just getting on the stage and just like doing something that will keep the plot going in some way. So
Very Muprov.
Yeah. And that's a big part of why we're having you on for this particular episode, because this episode has a special theme. We're moving right along. We have crossed the threshold, and that means that we are in
Pests and allies.
And if you're familiar with the stage of the hero's journey, you might have been expecting an enemies there at the end of Julian's sentence, but we're going to leave that off to the next episode, and we're going to talk about that at the same time that we talk ordeals. So we're just going to be talking about tests and allies, and know that during this series of scenes, you probably would be seeing a villain develop, and sometimes the villain is part of what's testing. But we're gonna leave that off for now, and talk shop on that on the next episode. There's a lot to talk about in test allies and enemies. But Julian, what's kind of how would you describe this stage at a macro level?
Well, at a macro level, at the most macro level, with no content to it, this is probably going to be the longest stage of your show. You're going to be in this zone for a while, and I think that this is like one of the most fun parts of the show. This is a time where you're going to be facing different tests and allies along the journey. This is the meat of it, and as a result, we like to call it kind of like the fun zone, where you get the opportunity to have maybe some one-off scenes with characters that don't have to come back. You get to explore the different tests that are in the special world, and in a way where you can focus on just having fun and like vibrant characters without worrying too hard about like a specific plot threads necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's really no narrative penalty for screwing around in this part of the show. As long as you come out one end and you go in, you hit a certain moment and you get to the place where you need to be. This is almost not a narrative part of the show, right, Julian?
Yeah, yeah. Something that I like to think about, which isn't strictly true with this part of the show, but is somewhat true, is that you can almost treat this like a short form. So if you do have experience with like montage or a lot of short form formats, scenes might be unrelated to each other. You're just coming in and doing something interesting and fun each time, and you can kind of treat it like that.
Mm-hmm. And I actually kind of struggle with short form in general. I find it more challenging than long form for myself, just because I practice long form a lot more. Sometimes having a platform and a base is easier than coming in with nothing and having to reset at the end of every scene and do the whole dance again. Daania, what are some, you kind of have already hinted at this, but when we're coming in and we really don't necessarily know what the next test is going to be, how do you handle that kind of pressure?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like I said before, if you're thinking about like what is correct to do or what is like the best thing to do or the funniest thing that you can do as a test, you're just not gonna like go on stage. So I think the best thing is kind of just thinking really simple, and it's like even just being like, okay, if we're in a fairy tale world, what is the first fairy tale character that comes to my head? Oh, like a fairy godmother. Okay, I'm just gonna go do it. And then just making a strong character choice when you go on stage. And even if you don't have like, well, I see this yeah, like when I did the hole digging person, like
Mhm.
I don't remember the show exactly, but I think the show was like a fantasy show. And I just went on stage and I started digging a hole. And then I called myself Betty. And that really had nothing to do with the world and wasn't the most creative character choice. I just felt like someone had to go on stage. And so, and that worked like pretty well. Like the character was cool, ended up being funny. And so I think just keeping that mentality of like, let me just put my body out there and then just fill up the stage so that the hero isn't alone. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the key things that really worked about that character was you sort of did have a want right away. You were already in a world that existed, and you were trying to dig this hole.
Mhm.
And some of the best allies that you can encounter are people who have their own problem already going on that's unrelated to the hero, because the hero is going to cross the threshold into a new world, and it is unlikely that there's someone in the new world waiting for the hero to come through to like be like, I'm gonna give you a test that specifically helps your worldview. No, the first person they meet is probably doing their own thing, right? So being able to come on and do your own thing. Julian's making his mouth open like, I disagree with that. So let's see what he's gonna say.
No disagreement. I just wanted to bring in an example that I think will serve us well for this episode that we talked about when we were practicing this, which is Alice in Wonderland, where one of the first people or things that she meets is this. I always screw up the examples, but the rabbit who has like a clock and is like
Mhm.
late to get somewhere. That's like a great example of this character had their own want in this world. Is not like very directly trying to interact with Alice in the story, but still like leads toward Alice like getting further into Wonderland.
Yeah, and it is. We've talked a lot about worldview for protag, but for these kind of side characters, especially even the throwaway ones, having a want of
Mhm.
like, I want that food over there, I want to dig this hole, is really key, and it gets kind of into the first type of test, which is the test for the ally rather than the test for um the protag. So a lot of times the ally is like, I need to get that nut from that bear, and the protag might be really well suited to help them get the nut from the bear, and then they do that because they're just a nice person or whatever, and now maybe that leads them to be running away from a bear, that leads them, or whatever next thing ensues, or maybe now they're the king of the squirrels and they have to go solve the royal court problems, whatever is happening. The point is that uh, it's a really good way to gain the ally if you have a thing that your worldview helps you with. If you're the sneakiest person, you love to steal, maybe you'll help steal the nut.
And this all like thinking about these different tests, it makes sense why this would be in the hero's journey. But one of the hardest parts, I think, and something I think we should really figure out how to do is how do you do like tests in improv, right? Like any sort of challenge in improv is like a hard thing, right? Because especially with kind of the Muprov ideals we're putting forth, we're supposed to be supporting one another, and really listening to what each other like want as improvisers. But how do we layer that with our characters being like opposed to one another, or our hero perhaps like struggling at a test?
I mean, there are kind of multiple different types of like, you can be testing your fellow improviser and giving them a genuine challenge. We'll kind of mention that later because Daania is very into that. Or you can be testing their character, or you can be testing both, or I guess you can't really be testing neither. uh, but yeah, let's start out maybe there with the testing the improviser, because we are just in the fun zone. So in the sort of short form spirit, this is a world you're not trying to accomplish anything at all with this test. What are some fun things that you've made people do on stage, Daania?
Okay, these are kind of hard to remember, but I think some of the fun ones that you can do are like you can just give them a really weird riddle that doesn't really have an answer and then just make them spew something. You could also do like an improv, like you could just do three things. You could be like, name three things that you think, and then have them do that. You can also just have them sing a song or a chant and then like have to dance around and stuff. Like that's a classic one. Really, or like anything that you think they would have fun doing on stage and that the audience would enjoy watching, because it doesn't really have to make sense. It can just be really weird too. So
Does it have to be something they would have fun doing?
I guess it doesn't have to be something they'd have fun doing, but it's something that they might feel a little bit uncomfortable doing, and therefore it would be funny to watch. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and this type of stuff, I think it's fun to like modulate these things depending on the specific tone of like your troupe and the show that you're going for. The spectrum that I would kind of put forth is like the more like kind of gritty fantasy or like hard into the world you want to be, the less you might do these like improviser tests. But if any of the people listening come from like a short form troupe or like a more comedy based improv group, I think this stuff will probably slot in pretty well to what you're good at right now.
Yeah, and you want a certain percentage of your tests to not further the plot, because
Yeah.
if you further the plot in every test, you're going to end the show faster than you want to, probably. So having some time for just total random stuff. And I guess that's also true of the character test. You can have some tests, well, that are just sort of, they're testing the character, but they're more in the goofy realm of like, can this character do some funny interaction with this funny old person, or like whatever. But the kind of silly tests that go through just the dynamic of the, or really allies. You can have these, maybe that's a better way of saying it, allies, where the point of them is that the character is interesting, and that the character is fun to watch, and we don't want to see this ally forever. They're just like a funny person who's on for a second. But what were you really getting at when you I don't think I fully batted your ball that you threw to me, Julian, of the talking about the sort of different types of tests. What were you trying to?
Yeah, and with respect to like actually doing tests in a way where our characters are struggling, but we're still like working together as improvisers. So yeah, obviously we can, try to make me like stand on one leg for 30 seconds, and that would make me literally struggle. But there's also a lot of tests that we did, and some skills that we probably want to build of how to make the character struggle. And then the open question is how much, while the characters are struggling, the actual improvisers are also struggling. Um, for example, like one test that like is common in fantasy that I'll like lob at either of you to think about how we might do this in a hero's journey improv show is like defeating some sort of monster, right? If you're in like a fantasy world and you are now traveling through the like dangerous plains, you might come across like a literal troll. that you have to defeat, and that's like a super classic test for a hero. So how could we handle this though as improvisers?
I'll let Daania, you want to take the first swing?
Wait, can you repeat the scenario?
Yeah, let's say you're the hero, or just somebody's the hero in the show, and this next scene starts off with a troll, and the troll is like, down to fight, and it seems like the hero is maybe going to have to fight this troll. How
Like
could we approach this?
how could we approach it?
Yeah,
I mean, I think you could literally just have them fight, like just start like doing stage combat-ish things and then have a winner. Um, I'm like a big fan of riddles too. So I like when the troll, or like if the troll was like, I have a riddle for you. I love watching those things. Um, and I think like a lot of it would be kind of up to the person who's playing the troll, because maybe the hero has a like fatal flaw or like something that's consistently come up in the show. Like maybe the hero's a coward, maybe the hero never asked for help. And then like the troll can like egg on that and be like, will you do this yourself? Like, can you defeat, like just like kind of build off of that flaw and try and get the hero to challenge it.
yeah, and totally. We'll talk definitely more about like the specific mechanics of how something like stage combat will work in the future, but certainly that's something to do. I think one of my like remaining open questions though is like, who's supposed to win this fight, and how do you like decide in the fly as improvisers while you're doing something that's probably like physically and like technically hard, how to like resolve something like this?
Well, this might be like a little evil, but I, I mean, I take to some account into what my partner wants to happen in the fight. But like, if I'm going out there, the first thing that I'm going to be thinking is, how can I make myself as big and scary as possible? I'm a large person. That's kind of, relatively easy for me. But if you're smaller, like adjusting things in your posture and the way that you talk, and the way that you swing things, and maybe killing like even an invisible side character, or one of, if there's a disposable ally around, like demonstrating your strength and that this is not going to be easy. And then you see what approach the hero takes, and you decide whether or not you want to let them win with that approach. So if the hero, this kind of gets into the worldview thing, and depending on what point of the show, you might be trying to do different things with their worldview. So if you're an ally test and the hero's world using their worldview, you might get outsmarted by it so that they show themselves off to the ally and the ally is helpful. But if you're trying to get the hero to change their worldview, maybe they have a bad worldview, they're going to start approaching you with their using the thing that worked in their previous world, and you cannot let that work if you want them to succeed. So let's say they're a brash person who goes into combats, and I am a troll, and they have been in mouse world where everyone is smaller than them, and that has been working awesome for them. And now they are, maybe they're the size of like a goat, or that's beside the point. But they come at me, I am just going to grab their sword, snap it in two, and go, and now the ball is back in their court. And either they adapt and learn a new worldview, or if they, whether that be the improviser or the character, can't figure out how to do that within the next little bit, I will just start killing them. And the trust is on the improv group to not let the character literally die, but maybe they wake up unconscious in like a witch's hut, or their ally has to come help them, or a storm has to blow through, or whatever. Like, they're escaping on luck. They're not going to get out of here just by skirting by. No, it's too long
Yeah.
of an answer, but
No, but I think to extract like one of the main things I take from this is that like we still do want to keep in mind some of the, you can say quadrant theory, or just in general the growth path you want for the hero on this journey, and that is because first of all, I'll rephrase the issue, which is, how do you know who's supposed to win and who's supposed to lose, right? And the common language that we can use as improvisers, or try to use at least, is the language of, is the hero growing? Is the hero like overcoming the thing that they should be overcoming? And if they're not, then they have to lose because they need to learn to overcome that thing. This is a kind of a tangent, and you can slap my face if this isn't useful. But what if in the first scene against the troll, the hero like does learn like kind of everything they need to learn? What if they like it's a little bit of a troll move by the improviser, but like they're like, oh yeah, no, I know now that I must not like fight with my brawn, and that back home I was being a terrible father, so I need to now do this. And what would we do there?
Debrief after the show.
Debrief, yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
Try again. I mean, you could just now maybe they need to realize that actually there are some challenges that need brawn, and or honestly, what Daania was saying, do a fun challenge as well.
Or I feel like also like there's more. You can still probably continue to challenge the hero in that respect or in a different respect. Like just really make it really hard for them in like the next scenes and see if you can like make a like maybe the improviser will then realize that it was too soon and then backtrack a little or something. So
well, I guess this this leads into the concept of the protagonist improviser versus the other improvisers, where hopefully going into this, the protagonist doesn't feel the burden on them to have to make those like calls of like learning when they have overcome their issues. So Daania, let's talk a little bit about, you've throughout all the hero journey shows and in general have played both protagonists and non-protagonists, and how do you feel like playing those different roles is different for you?
I don't like to be the protagonist at all. It's my least favorite. Not that it's bad, it's still really fun, but I think it gives you the least amount of freedom because I like to play with like different characters. I love doing that. And so being a protagonist kind of means that you're stuck in that one character role and stuff, and you kind of have to be like your personality can't be overbearing. Like you can't have a very aggressive character choice because like you're the hero. So you have to like be a bouncing board kind of for everything else. And sometimes I think when I play the protagonist, I kind of feel like I'm floating around in scenes and just like, oh wow, where am I? And just like kind of like just a lot of curiosity, a lot of just like, oh my God, like you're kind of just like walking around like, please someone come on stage, which is also fun, but it is definitely different than being an ally or a test, because I think when you're in that role, you can kind of just be like, oh, I want to get on stage. And I can just be this really weird character who has like a Southern accent. And, oh, I want to be on stage now again. I'm going to just be on all fours and like rolling around. But you can just really make those crazy choices, which you can't really do as a pro tag because you need to be a plot pusher, or you need to at least be like kind of a blank slate-ish. So yeah, those are my thoughts on, yeah.
Hal, I feel like you also have an aversion to playing pro tag.
Yeah, I don't like to do it. I like if I'm film noir, I want to be the detective. Slasher, I want to be the slasher. Like that's crazy fun. But ideally, in these kind of shows, the pro tag is not doing the narrative work. They are going to be in almost every scene, and if they're trying to do the narrative work at the same time as being in the scene, that's just not what you want. You want all the other characters like supporting that person and just having that person glide along, and that is just a little less in my wheelhouse. You want to be playing these kind of long, sustainable characters that are a little less interesting. Like it's just not as much fun for me. And I would warn you that in your group, that what's not fun about playing a protagonist is doing a good job while playing the protagonist. You might have someone who chooses to play the protagonist like a side character who has tons of fun the whole show, and like the show goes off the rails. So you check in your group, like it's a little red flag, and this is where you might want to randomly select your protagonist. Some groups will have someone who will become the protagonist of like every single show, or 2 or 3 people, and they probably are not doing a good job being that. So sometimes you have to do it. But I think we were in a good situation with our group where no one wanted to be the protagonist. It was a pretty supportive thing to do to be the protagonist, and most people ended up being the protagonist once or twice. And if you're in 1 in 6 shows, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, this is a novel, interesting, fun thing, and I'm willing to do that and kind of feel attached to getting to do that. You get to be on stage all the time, which is fun. But
Yeah, and big picture, protagonist, you have to have some crazy like improv stamina. You have to be able to be in all these scenes and maintain a consistent but still growing character. But you don't need maybe the same like level of thought on the shape of show or like some of the more narrative aspects, and you also don't need to worry too hard about playing like an interesting or fun character.
and sort of getting into the like, I think it's good if the protagonist has a fair amount of inertia. If rather than thinking like, oh, here's my worldview, I'm going to change. At the beginning of the show, maybe you think here's my worldview, but probably your worldview is given to you by a side character in your first scene or whatever. And then basically you just have to dig in and do the thing that your character would do. And I think this comes very naturally to people. Oftentimes they wind up with worldviews that are similar to like something they already would have, or at least that they can identify with and play. Sometimes you get endowed with a worldview a bunch of times and you just ignore it, and that, that's its own problem. But once you're on track, you are going to approach your problems with your worldview, and you're also not really going to want to change as an improviser. And you're genuinely going to be like, why aren't they just letting me, and I think that it's kind of on the other people to apply enough genuine pressure that the character and improviser naturally change rather than the other way around of like, wink, here's some pressure. Now you have to know that my wink means to change. Of just like, no, I'm just not going to let you through until.
Pro tags are tough. I think we still have a lot to talk though about with respect to different allies and how they might work in the show.
Daania, I want to ask you about the sticky ally, because your Hole Digger became a sticky ally. Servbot was another memorable character from the sci-fi show. Daania was but Daania played a lot of sticky allies who stuck with the protagonist throughout the whole show. How did you balance that? Like, if you're a sticky ally, what is your sort of plot arc? And when do you leave? When do you come back? What's the vibe?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the character that you end up playing. Like the Hole Digger was really just kind of a normal person who was also looking for the treasure, and then the nature of the like banter between that Hole Digger and the protag made it so that it made sense that the Hole Digger would be like a kind of friend ally person who just went along for the ride. Whereas there's some, allies that might have like stronger choices and might have stronger wants that would make them not be there for the entire show. And I think like Servbot, I forgot about Servbot. I don't even know how Servbot became a thing. I think the nature of that show was also like it was a sci-fi world, and Servbot was just a very like normal robot that would just serve them. And so kind of the like that character choice of like not of Servbot not having a strong want except to like just serve as a robot made Servbot stick around for the entire show.
And this is something, Daania, that I feel like an issue that you have, or that you have to face often, that we all have to face as improvisers, and is one of the toughest things, is when the audience like loves you, when you are playing a delightful character that like clearly is just everybody's into. How do you balance like staying in that character and like staying on stage and reveling in the joy that you're bringing to everybody versus bowing out when you feel like, oh, maybe my time here is done, especially in a format like Hero's Journey where you have like a hero in particular who you can't necessarily just become the protagonist.
Yeah, I think like I think a lot of it is always remembering that like improv is about everyone on stage and about like the story and not about you. And so like a lot of the joy from those characters also comes from just the smaller moments. So like you can't the like joy would dissipate if that character almost became the protag, because the reason that it's so joyful is because they're just some random character who sometimes just says things and like is kind of on the side. It's like if you think about any like TV show that has like like Donkey, I don't like just some random side character that is like really joyful, but like is very clearly not the pro tag. And so I think in like the story sense, that's definitely one thing. And then in the improv sense, it's always like no one likes to play with an improviser who would just take up the whole stage and like make jokes, and like that's just not fun for anyone. And so like just always remembering that like you're just an improviser who's supporting your other players, and like you should just go with your gut for when you think is an appropriate time to come, and when you can see that like the plot is happening, like you're not needed. So yeah.
And you have kind of mentioned two different things. One of them is the sort of Hole Digger style character, like your Ron Weasley, Samwise Gamgee. Like you are kind of a highlighter for the protagonist. You're sort of their helpful person. I'm just going along. I'm not that interesting. I'm just guiding some narrative stuff, helping out. And then Donkey is kind of in a different camp, and so is maybe to some extent Servbot, where there's kind of continuous comic relief, right? And like is there? How do you know which one of those two to play in? And I guess both of them, what makes them sticky is maybe that they're not the pro tag. But like, how do you handle? It's particularly, I feel like the loyal one is very straightforward. How do you do like a continuous comic relief? Have you seen that successfully? What do you do with that?
Yeah, I think even with continuous comic relief, you can't go on stage being like, I'm gonna be the funny one. Like you can't go on stage thinking that. I think so much of this is just like the improv of it. If it's like going on stage, making a character choice, and then just seeing how that character interacts with the pro tag. And then as you watch that happen, you'll kind of realize what the nature of your ally is, and like whether it's going to be comic. Like I had no idea when I was served, but I thought I was going to be on stage for 1 second, serving and then getting off stage. Like I did not think I'd be served bot the entire show. But then my other players who like I don't have control of what they do, like they ended up really playing with me on stage. And so I ended up being a like more consistent character. So I think a lot of it is just about how the other players interact with you, because they also get to kind of decide how your relationship is with the pro tag.
So maybe Donkey in a vacuum is not actually even that funny of a character, but because Shrek's worldview is I'm grumpy and I want to be alone,
Yes.
like it's really funny. Like as if you see someone who has that kind of worldview, you're like, I'm gonna go irritate them consistently until they learn to love me. Maybe is a way to solve that problem. All right, Julian, tennis to you. We're dark allies and really dark allies. What are we talking about? Why is this super useful to narrative, and how can you do it?
Yeah, so dark allies. First, I'll just say the concept is you might have some sort of ally who, to the hero, is acting like an ally, but behind the scenes, they might either be working for the grand villain, or they themselves might be the villain who the hero has to face at the end of their journey. And this is very useful and very rich for many reasons. One of the things that I love about improv is like these moments of dramatic irony that we can have, and something where the audience is keyed into the fact that this dark ally is actually plotting against the hero, but the characters don't know. I think that's a very entertaining thing to watch on stage. So it provides a rich source of that. And then also in a grand like emotional way towards the end of the show, once this ally assumedly reveals that they are indeed a dark ally, uh, this is a great moment of betrayal. This is a great heartbreak for the hero to send them into an emotional spiral. And yeah, it's a very rich premise.
And there's also like first you break the heart, but then if you're like a medium dark ally, maybe you're a servant of the villain, then you also get the up character arc, right? Where you suddenly realize, you know what, I'm actually going to betray the villain and save the day, and it does a lot of work for you.
So many like stories like that, which I'm blanking on right now. But yeah, clearly the sort of double agent type thing where you originally are trying to be evil, but then you grow to love the hero on the journey.
And it also makes sense. Then you're often leading the hero to the villain,
Yeah.
So it's like now you're along the path. You already know the way. Like there's just a lot is done for you with that. I think we can skip over to the kind of strip the hero tests. And the kind of early on, and this kind of gets in with split the team test as well. Sometimes the purpose of the tests, especially if the hero is really good at the things they do, is to take away what makes the hero good or what the hero has previously relied on. Daania, you've mentioned that you just like big thing is just get on, and I think that that's very important. Do you ever? But I've seen you do things like this, where you take away their stuff or like, nope, you're just alone now. How do you combine those two things when you see something in the show that needs to happen? What's your way of making it happen? Because I think you are very good at making stuff happen in shows.
How do I combine what two things?
Like, let's say you talked a lot about like you're in a moment where you don't know what's going to happen, just get on stage. Let's say you're in a moment where you do know what needs to happen, like you're like, this hero needs to get there alone, but you don't have some great way to make it happen.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you wait for some brilliant shining beam of light to, or how do you make it happen?
Yeah, I think you just make it happen in literally the most obvious way that you could. I mean, like there's like shows where like you need to get to space somehow, and it's like, how would we get to space? And you just get on stage, you're like, oh look, like there's a spaceship, and then you just go like just it's improv, and like it doesn't have to be the most logical and perfect thing. So like I think just doing the thing that is gonna get the protagonist, or there's a magical bridge that will take you to the mountain that just appeared. Like those things are still really joyful for the audience to watch, because like that's what makes improv. Like if they wanted to see a like beautifully crafted like story, they would go watch a feature film, like this is improv for a reason. And so much of the joy just comes from those moments where it just is a nonsensical thing that appears that will, like move the plot forward. I think Ahmad also does this really well. I think he just is like, oh look, the Apple police are like here, like just so random. Yeah.
This is a funny set of people to be with, because Hal, I feel like I rarely see you do things like this.
Yeah, and that's kind of a part of why we're having Daania on the show, because like it's not like my way of improvising is right at all. Like you want a mixed pool of voices. There are a lot of situations where I need to do something like this, and in those situations are the most devastating for the show if I'm the person who is in the show, because that's an area that I need to work on. I'm reluctant to do that.
But yeah, stripping the hero and splitting the team, right? So these are things that like might need to happen in the show, and what we mean by this, like, strip the hero. If your hero is like some sort of bad, like a thing more about quadrant theory. If your hero is some sort of bad operator, some cool person who is very like powerful in their ordinary world for whatever reason, it might just be the nature of the special world that like their power doesn't work, and to convey that, you need to kind of figuratively strip down the hero. Or they might also like have some stuff that makes them actually like really cool, like for example like a powerful sword or whatever. And in that case, early on you might want to actually just strip the hero of those items, take it away from them, so that they have to be weak.
The classic thing to strip is the final powerful object that they're getting to. You get there and it's, Kung Fu Panda, the scroll is blank, and you're like, uh-oh. And Lego Movie, it was all inside. There was no prophecy. I'm spoiling some movies. But,
yeah, and similarly, splitting the team. Sometimes over the course of this journey, you're going to build up such an awesome team that they can do anything together. But if you split the team, then this gives the hero the opportunity to face things on their own and do the growth that hopefully they were setting out to do.
And I want to go back to what you were just saying about the sort of difference between the way Daania and I play and the importance of kind of having an ensemble. Because you can I can tell when I look at a cast for a show, I sometimes look at it and I'm like, ooh, these are all great improvisers. This cast is not going to work because they're all great improvisers in a similar way. And when someone needs to do this one thing, there's no one in there who gets how narrative works, or there's no one in there who is just going to rip it, or there's no one in there, et cetera, et cetera. And I think Julian, you and Daania also are to some extent different in the way that you go about things, in that Julian is a heavily mental person, I think, of like, you're thinking a lot about the worldview stuff of like second level thing. I don't see a lot of Julian coming on blank. Just I'm just a totally random, and I think Daania is a more instinctual person who comes on and still does the right thing to help the narrative, but is more likely to be receptive and adaptive, like in that kind of mode. And I've created some packets that can demonstrate both of your kind of paths. So I'm gonna toss these balls to both of you. You're both gonna have like 2 seconds, and I want you to lock in, even while the other person is answering. I want you to mentally lock in your answer so that you don't we genuinely hit. So Julian, you don't get time to craft some idea or something like that. That's not how this is going to work. We're relying on you being honest. But basically, these are going to be, and this is the part of the show where we're giving you exercises to do in your practice. For practicing this stuff, you just want to do scenes. But practicing the middle of a show is challenging. So either at the top of your practice, you can do the beginning of a show and then just iterate different possible beginnings, branching off whatever you did. Or you can create packets for people where you're like, here's what you need to know. This person jumps on and plays the protagonist. So that's what I've done right now. They were very simple to create. All I did was I followed the Muprov Musing guide. I picked a random worldview. Then I picked a genre and a quadrant for the worldview. And then I picked a texture and I put those all together. So this person will have just crossed the threshold. Which one of you guys wants to go first?
I think you should go first because I'm still kind of confused.
All right. So Julian will go first, and then we'll toss it to Daania. Okay, so this is the simplest packet first. This is a fantasy world. You have a good worldview that doesn't fit. Your worldview is that you really believe that you shouldn't necessarily that you should do things yourself and go on adventures and like this, but you are a servant in. The hero is a servant in a palace. They overhear a conversation in the palace of some sort of knight or person who has gone off on a quest for treasure and failed to get it because things are way too dangerous. Then they are caught overhearing. And the penalty for this is going to be like death or something. And they manage to talk it down to being banished into a dark wood that's conveniently along the way towards the journey. Like they offer like, I'll go get the thing. This is my banishment. And the woods seals behind them, and this is the murder woods. Julian, what's your first instinct? You're entering as a character. What are you doing in the murder woods?
In the murder woods, I mean, I'm probably coming on as some sort of scary tree or other sort of plant-like creature. My like, second order hope here is that like I can come on as some sort of like scary thing, and maybe the protagonist like is not afraid of me. And either that can like serve to grant them an ally, like some little mink like runs out from behind the bush and is like, oh, like you're not afraid of the big scary tree, and joins the hero, or yeah, I don't really know what happened, but my instinct would be to come on as just something scary.
I thought you were Wizard of Ozing it when you said some little mink runs out from the bush, as in like there's this murder tree and there's actually being controlled by a tiny little mink. But yeah, that works too. So you're trying to give, you're hoping someone else will come on and save the day from just I'm just a bad person who's trying to kill you. Is your vibe?
Yeah, and just quadrant theory wise, like if we're trying to show that this hero is, or if this hero does have like a good worldview, and we're trying to like help that out, then yeah, like I think one of the first things is like give them an easy dub. Yeah.
All right, Daania. Now I'm putting this to you. The first thing that you thought of when I said, all right, this character now winds up in this dark murderous woods. What was your first idea?
Okay, my first idea was a really scary beast that
Mm-hmm.
really freaks out the character. And
Mm-hmm.
the beast, there's not some huge battle, but the beast just really shakes the character to like a representative of the how scary the forest is. But then I also had like a visual instinct that was like, I guess technically my first instinct too. I just saw in my head like a random hut in the woods that the character finds, and then there's someone in there.
All right, who's in the hut? Or let's say I walk into the hut and I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of weird fruit you have here. Who are you now?
Now I'm some old lady who lost her family in these woods and knows about the dangers and wants to warn the protagonist to not go any further.
Cool. We forgot to mention mentors, but the classically old people who have had experience and failed at the hero's current journey is like a really classic uh, ally to meet. That's awesome. So some sort of mentor character, and you can see that kind of Daania style of like first thing hut, second thing classically ingrained like awesome narrative hit. So that's awesome. That's kind of the way I like to play too as well. All right, second packet, Daania, you're gonna have to take this one first. All right, so this is how I created this packet. Was I took bad worldview that misses with what the world is doing, and I took the genre sci-fi. All right, this hero has the worldview that lying can get you out of any problems, even the consequences of lying. However, they live on a very small mining spaceship where pretty much everyone knows what's going on, and they're fooling the same people again and again and are reliably in trouble. Then their ship gets boarded by pirates and robbed, with the theory that they're gonna rob and pillage everything. And this liar is able to convince the pirates that they recently found a rare treasure on one of their mining expeditions, and gives them a bogus address of the most dangerous planet in the galaxy so that the pirates will die. Unfortunately, the pirates want this person to come with them to guide them, and now they're with a team of three pirates going through the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. I guess this is similar to Murder Woods, but what's the first thing that you're going to run into if you're with some pirates? Let's say a team of three, one leader and two henchmen,
Mhm.
and you've just landed. The ship has just opened. What's the first thing that's going to happen, or where does it land, or
Um,
whatever, or does it crash land, or what?
and you're on some dangerous planet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess the first thing that I can see happening is like there's some like rustling or something happening when they walk onto the planet. They're like, "Oh my God, what's that?" And then um some weird looking alien appears. And I'm not sure what this alien would exactly act like, but it would either be super nice and super kind, or it would be like just very menacing, and then one of the pirates would kill it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go with the super nice. Let's say you come out and you're like, "Woo, you!" And let's say two other improvisers come up behind you and also start going, and like giving little presents to the people. Um, what, Julian? You see that this is happening. What do you do when you see all the three like really cute, inviting aliens on this planet?
And I'm the hero,
No,
or
you're the one person who's not on stage
oh,
yet.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see the nice inviting aliens on the planet. Um, I probably am a big scary fish kind of alien, and I eat them. Is the first thing I'm thinking of.
Yeah, like one of the best things you can do if you're trying to make something scary, especially if
Mhm,
it's been is to do this like inviting cute thing.
mhm.
And then all of a sudden, you're the dangling thing on the end of the fish, or you're well, for whatever reason, or they all run off and there's just whatever. But Julian, same question to you. You've now landed on this planet. Who are you going to interact with?
Yeah. So this is a very hard hit to convey. So I don't know how it would get through, but I would like to come on as like a big scary like Grumbo type alien who is like humanoid and sentient, and who the hero like maybe has like claimed that they know, and I don't know this hero at all. Um, and I would like to like give like kind of a cold shoulder to the hero as they like maybe dig themselves deeper into their lie by like claiming to know me. I would probably play like an actually like silent character or like a grunting character.
Oh God.
Uh,
So you're like literally just a threshold guardian where the person has to talk to. Okay, so let's say they're struggling. What do? They're like, I don't.
I would probably just like grab them and like bring them somewhere
Okay, so
deeper.
and you would leave the pirates behind as villains to sort of catch up with later, or you would grab.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'd growl at them.
So you're a split the team kind of person on the pirates.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm kind of a kill the backup pirates kind of person, but
Mm.
to each their own. All right, next one. This is one I took a good worldview fits. This is someone whose worldview is that they're just really like where I am is perfect. I want everything to be the same and to be boring and nice. This is an animal-based show, and the protagonist is a tortoise who lives in a pet shop. Unfortunately, there is when the shop closes, one of their friends, who's some sort of like more exciting animal, is trying to convince them to go, sneak out and go to some sort of thing. They are very reluctant to. The friend is physically pushing on them, and eventually the tortoise falls out of the cage and lands on its back on a freshly mopped floor. Suddenly, they slowly start to slide. This is done, improvisers are moving in the opposite direction rather than the tortoise moving in the direction until eventually they slide out of the store down into the mall and over the edge of a thing that plops them down into a body of like a fountain, a decorative fountain. You know what I mean? So you're in the mall at night. You've slid a really long distance in the mall, let's say. Some troll things have gone by. What are we test allies and enemies? What's your first hit, Julian?
I am imagining I want to be like a like rat or some other like creature who is in the mall at night who like I would want to like give an easy win to the tortoise. So maybe I'm like just like trying to grab like a coin or something from the fountain. And it's like something that the tortoise can like grab really easily, either like physically or maybe I'm just like splashing around and I'm making a big mess, and it requires like the tortoise to be a little bit more methodical and like reaching onto this ledge or something. But basically, I guess I want to be kind of the donkey to this tortoise.
All right, Daania, what about you?
My first hit was this is like genuinely my first hit. So I don't know if I would do this, but this is my first hit is some like snotty little child who is by the fountain and sees the turtle and then picks it up and gets obsessed with it. And then maybe the child would drop it or lose it somewhere. But yeah, that's my first thought.
And that also a lot of these type of journeys, the journey is get back home. That's what the tortoise wants to do. So if you're Julian, you maybe haven't gotten the person far enough away, but if you're this kid now, maybe they're like in Chuck E. Cheese or something like that, and you're like, how am I ever gonna get back home? But yeah, both of those things would definitely challenge the protagonist's worldview. And I want to get just one other, like, let's say we get a little farther into the show, maybe for whatever reason we're now in a Chuck E. Cheese, just because what about this is a random encounter. What's to Daania? Who's the random, no narrative encounter in the Chuck E. Cheese?
The the Chuck E. Cheese mascot, and the turtle thinks it's a real mouse. And it's just some really weird encounter where I don't really know what happens, but it's just with the face of the mascot or something, and the turtle just gets really freaked out that it's like sitting there. Is my first thought.
Julian, what about you?
I had this visual. I really want the turtle to have to play Dance Dance Revolution. Um, but or the tortoise to play Dance Dance Revolution. But I like maybe it's like the first level and it's like very easy, but we get to revel in this tortoise like maybe we like cut hours later, and this tortoise is like struggling to like hit the first two in rhythm.
All right, Dance Dance Revolution. The class make your person dance. All right. The last one, I took a bad worldview that fits. I took the supernatural genre. This is a popular girl at a high school. She believes that appearance is everything and is very adept at being socially successful. However, when the prom queen is announced, it is announced that it is a tie between her and a girl that is much less cool than her. They fight over the crown physically, and during the fight, she finally yanks it forward and bonks herself in the face, slow motion, knocking herself out. When she wakes up, everyone is a monster, and she is in monster high school. And she does not recognize the people or what's going on, really. She's a new kid in monster high school where, it is cool to be destructive and strange and super uncool to look normal. I've kind of already given the wink of like this is where she wakes up. So I want for this one something more in the middle, like maybe at the point where this is the test that actually is going to change her. What's a rather than an ally or like what kind of thing could you endow as a test or what's something that's going to really challenge her worldview in Monster High School once she's been there for a while, but maybe that she'll be able to overcome because she's already hit some tests.
Okay, I think it could be like some nerdy monster that she meets, and who she's like really mean to, but then like she needs him to like solve something really nerdy. And then she like watches him solve this nerdy puzzle and is like, oh my God, like you are really uncool, but actually like that doesn't matter because you are smarter than me. Like just something like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is the ally test, which we hadn't mentioned yet. Or like we had mentioned the opposite way if the ally needs the protagonist's help. Sometimes the ally is the one who solves it and the protagonist is something that learns from that. Julian, what's to you?
Yeah, I was just thinking about like, oh, it's really funny that the monsters want to be like, weird and gross in this world. And maybe even the popular ones do. So maybe there's like a monster, like maybe not prom yet, but like homecoming. And like the homecoming competition is like yeah, it's like a fart off. And it's something that maybe like she like does find funny and like she did find funny back into like the normal world. But like now she's like she has to do it and she's able to like be like, wow, this is really funny that we get to fart.
Mm-hmm. So like I'm just gonna throw this out there. Like maybe, in the first, couple scenes, she tries to be with the popular monsters and she's not gross enough to be with them at all. And then she goes with this nerdy monster that Daania's talking about and who's not as gross and kind of not as cool. But learns like to value that, but then also kind of learns to be gross because they're still grosser than her because they're, a monster. And then
Yeah.
through that, maybe, has some farting machine or like, somehow calculates the right air velocity to like, well, you know what I mean? That kind of nonsense. Okay, those are my 4 packets. If you want to use those packets, feel free. If you want me to write them down for you, you can email in a question of the week and I will barter the written versions of the packet for that. If you want to make your own, it's super easy. All you do is pick a worldview, whether it fits, a genre, and then throw in some texture there. Cool. Our final thing that we have is just asking some more Daania questions, some more Daania talk. Julian, you kind of had a...
Yeah. I don't know what you're referring to, but yeah. So Daania, I just want to ask you something about the terminology here because this is how I've described you, and I don't know if I describe this to you, if I say this to your face, but that you are the queen of just ripping it in improv, and I feel like you maybe didn't always like just rip it to the level that you do now. Like, how did you get to that place where you feel like you can just rip it like that?
Yeah. Thank you. That's so nice. I I think a lot of it was practice and confidence building. I think when I like first got into Sims, do people know what Sims is? Is that a term? Okay, yeah. When I first got into Sims, I was like pretty intimidated by you guys and intimidated by like all the, I don't know, experienced improvisers and stuff. And I felt a lot less confident ripping it because I wanted to like seem good at improv and I wanted to, I don't know, your ideas are not like they're precious things and showing them to like new people is like kind of scary sometimes. And so I wasn't as comfortable doing that. So I think once like getting really comfortable with an ensemble and getting really confident in your own improbability and style was really important to me because I think once I stopped trying to improvise like other people and I was like, you know what, I know how I like to do it and this is something I'm good at and I'm just gonna like do it this way. That's when I started, I think, getting more confident, kind of just going on stage. And a lot of it was also just being turning off the part of my brain that was like, you have to be good and you have to be funny. Cause those things are like killer. Cause whenever I think that, I like don't do anything. So just turning that off was really important for me too.
What advice would you have for someone who is in a similar situation in that they're maybe in a group that plays in a way that's different than the way they naturally play, and they're sort of getting more comfortable, but is totally different from the way that you personally like to play? Like, is it translatable to any way that you like to play of just love yourself, or is there something about the specifics of your situation that make just ripping it the master strategy?
Um, okay, I don't know if this will answer your questions. Tell me if it doesn't, but I think like it's a combination of remembering the core rules of improv, which are still supporting your partner, making your partners look good, like all those things. Like that is the core of how improv is done, and anyone who can do that and understands that can be in an ensemble and do well. And then the way that you play, I think, is just like a small piece of that, where it's like I know sometimes I like to just go on stage and be a random character. I'm not gonna let that overpower like supporting my partners and like having a good plot. But I am gonna let that like I'm not gonna say no to myself when I feel like that's the right thing to do. So when your brain says like, oh, I should probably go on stage, then you shouldn't tell your brain that you shouldn't go on stage. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's hard to explain not in action, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, we should be wrapping relatively soon, but I also want to ask Daania. We've been focusing on hero's journey in this episode, but throughout your whole improv career that I've overlapped with at least, I've noticed you play a lot of characters that have the sort of like vibrant and magnetic qualities that a lot of like the allies that you would want to see in a hero's journey have. So what are some of your favorite like side characters or just characters in general that you've played?
Yeah. Um, I loved playing Zine, who I played in a Disney Channel original movie format. She was a like emo, rebellious side girl who was just like the complete archetype of like just that emo girl. I loved playing her. It was so fun and like natural. Um, I loved playing Betty, who's just a southern person who also like has a gun is how I envision her. I don't know. She's just great. I like playing her a lot. I loved Servbot. Um, that was great. And yeah, those are the only ones I can think of right now, but those are some of my favorites. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're all delightful
Yeah,
characters.
it's worth mentioning the Betty thing because everyone has a different way of doing the names. I never say any character names ever, and I just
Mhm.
exist without them, and that way I don't have to remember anything. Julian does the reasonable thing, where you like you endow the name, try to help people remember whatever. Ahmad does the thing where everyone else gets named Bob, which is kind of helpful to remember for yourself. But you have your own branding for personal, and what is that?
My own branding, where I just name myself Betty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I there's just this one character who I just really like to play sometimes called Betty, and I go on stage and I'm like, I'm Betty, and then it's time for Betty to do her thing. But I don't do it in every show, but when the moment is right, Betty will appear.
Julian, you got anything else? Or any last? You had a special last question, Julian, right? Of like just to ask people if they have anything they want to share.
Yeah, I just want to ask if you have anything to shout out, improv related or not, on the podcast. Anything you'd like to say, or any messages as well that you would like to impart on our viewers?
Like anything, or is
anything? Anything. It could be about, standing someone or whatever.
Oh, okay. Well, shout out to Taylor Swift. I love you, Taylor. If you're watching this podcast, which I'm sure you are, please come to my house. Yeah, that's my shout out. And shout out to my favorite animal, which is a wolf. I love you, wolves. So
thank you. Thank
you
very much.
Well, if there's not anything left on you?
No, that's all.
If there's not anything left, then this has been
Muprov
Musings.
I kind of have one. Maybe we can use this. So my sign off is that I'm aiding a format that I made up called improvised elections.
Oh
wow! Do the other people know yet, or is this?
This episode's going out today, so.
I don't know if everyone else knows yet. Okay, maybe I'll do a different one.
No! It's too late. It's too late. You're locked in. You're breaking news on Muprov Musings.
Yeah, breaking news.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm doing that, and it's kind of crazy because I was expecting to do it as like a spring mid-quarter format, and so now I have to like rapid fire, figure out what this format kind of looks like because it's pretty rough.
Is it going to be like relationship court at all, or is it going to be something different?
It's going to be a combination of like relationship court and improvised bachelor, because it's going to be like 3 candidates and you're following their home lives and their campaign lives.
Oh, that's sick.
There's going to be primaries. It's going to be cheeky. It's probably going to be the Simpsons most cheekiest and controversial, because the point of the format is to be a little bit controversial. So
is it split formats, I assume? Or is everyone doing okay? This is a Halloween show?
Yeah, because elections are in November.
It's a fall show.
Yeah. That makes sense. Are you gonna make it spooky at all?
I think politics is pretty spooky. So I think it fits more in the theme of the primaries, which are on the first. Or not the first, but like I don't know, I forgot when they are. But the primaries are really coming up. But it could be spooky. That would be funny to do a slasher / improvised election.
Is it a primary election? Are there Democrats and Republicans, or
like in this format?
Yeah.
So it's gonna be in a fantasy land. It's not gonna be in the real world because that's gonna get too intense. It's gonna be a like real election. There's gonna be primaries, and then there's gonna be a like actual election. The audience will vote. It's just gonna be like they're just gonna be multiple debates, and the audience is gonna pick basically. Yeah, and so they're going to be debating on issues in the fantasy land, like which lollipops deserve rights and which ones don't.
That's sick.
That is awesome. Breaking news here. You heard it here first.
See me now, like you did back then. See me now, I should thought you cared. All these times they're changing. Oh, Can't you see me now? Like you always did. Can't you see me now? I just wanna be with you. When the times they seem so crazy, can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? See me now. Can't you see me now? Oh, can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Like you did back then. Can't you see me now? I remember way back when. Oh, and times they are changing. You know, things are rearranging. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Everything is changing. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now?